Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Simba.
All right. So let's just get straight into the interview right now. I just want to know, in one word, when you look at your performance in 2018, how would you summarize it?
Satisfactory.
Satisfactory. Good. Would you tell me some of the areas in which you saw improved performance that led to satisfaction?
So we have had a tough operating environment over the last couple of years. So the efforts that we've been putting in place to address these challenges that particularly are coming in from the economy and how our customers are experiencing it started bearing fruit. So that was one. We saw some good progress made on helping our customers with the recovery side. The other part that was really good for us was on the non-funded income side. And here really is a greater focus on driving non-funded income. So really service-based income. And this is really on the back of our strategy to focus on how we can better serve our clients. So extended reach, looking at different channels, and adopting innovations that can help our customers actually serve their own customers better.
Yes. All right, let's just come back to exactly what is happening in the economy right now. There was a scare or a tense moment in the economy just recently when the Central Bank of Kenya CEO, that is Governor, Patrick Njoroge, decided to demonetize the economy, especially of the 1,000-old currency. A lot was said about exactly how this was going to affect the economy. You'd be the right person to tell me whether you've actually felt a bit of shock in terms of your business as the drive goes on.
So I think it needs to be put into context so that it's clear what this exercise is about. And I think the governor has been very clear in his pronouncements on why this is happening. So right from the introduction, it's clear that this is actually a constitutional requirement to change the currency so that certain features can be adopted on our currency. That has now been completed. It had taken some time, but it's now been completed, which is great. The second beat, and this is the part that links to demonetization, is really just about one particular series of our currency, and that's the 1,000 shilling series. So we have had that around the region, our currency is used a lot, and the challenge was that it was also used for illegal activities. So by demonetizing the 1,000 series, it allows us to control the illegal use of our currency. So that, as you heard, has been given 4 months. So October 1 is when we will find that the old series 1000 is no longer legal tender. The 1000 series that has been introduced, the new one, is then going to be the one that continues as our legal tender. So it's an important exercise for our public to understand. We also need to exercise patience because an undertaking of this kind requires people to also make sure that they're armed with information. Remember, the other series of currencies are still in use as legal tender, and the 1,000 shilling old series is still in use as legal tender through to the end of September. So we need to exercise patience as we find these new notes being introduced into the economy.
Yes. So you will not really say that during this time when they've been exercising this drive for the demonetization of the 1,000 shilling currency, nothing has really happened, or do we wait and see?
So it's still too early to say. I mean, we've only had a few weeks into it. There are still logistical issues that have to be dealt with. For example, all banks have to make sure they recalibrate their ATMs, their note counting machines. That takes a bit of time. They have to be done machine by machine. We have to make sure that all the currency centers across the country have enough currency to supply the branch networks of banks. You've got other machines that we have to also recalibrate. You know, nowadays you go into a mall, for example, you have to park, right, and pay for your parking. Even those machines have to be calibrated with the new currencies. So some patience needs to be exercised in that respect. But in terms of the intended goal as well from the demonetization, We are yet to see that. I think right now people are still understanding the rules that have been set. To be clear, any bank can actually exchange for members of the public up to certain limits, and the central bank then comes into play for limits above 1 million at the moment. So all of that needs to be understood, and I think people are first of all understanding that information. Then if they have money that they're holding, they know exactly where to go.
2018 was quite a year, especially for the banks in the country, because this is a time when SMEs in the country were crying of some sort of protests from the banks of lending to them. I'm talking about the capping on the interest rates. But when we were listening to Rotich this time around when he was reading the budget, he said that we really need to talk about financial inclusion and also talk about the other areas of the economy that we've not fixed, so that now this capping of interest rates can die a natural death. But we have some sections of the economy that are really fighting for the repealing of the interest on the caps on the interest. Would you say that yes, the capping of interest affected your ability or your willingness to lend to SMEs in 2018?
So I think we have had a very consistent position as the banking industry that the caps were never good for the economy and were going to constrain the growth of the economy. We still have to keep looking at the studies that are happening over time that will indicate what exactly the impact of the interest rate capping has been to date and will continue to impact upon us. Now you have to remember that what drives our pricing is also about our costs of funding, and this has a lot of elements that come into it, right? If we have competition with the government, for example, for a mobilization of savings, then we are going to obviously be driven by that pricing because the government is a big borrower. There are inefficiencies that are inherent in the way we are forced to do business because we have to deal with government registries, for example. And if they take long for us to be able to execute on a loan transaction, that leads to additional cost. So there are a lot of factors that are driving the pricing structure. Now, what you then have to juxtapose that against is the returns on capital that banks are then looking for. Now, if I find that as a bank, lending at a certain price is actually destroying value for us, then naturally we will not be inclined to lend in that space. So we have to say, how do we actually make sure that that risk-reward return is actually attractive for banks? Now, if we find that we are constrained in how we can recover the risk that we're facing, then it means that you tend to shy away from that risk. That's just natural. That's how you do business, right? Now, you can try and mitigate that. Some of the mitigations that will come in will be things like insurance, right? But remember, the insurer himself has to also mitigate that risk. So he has to understand, will this business survive? Can I actually cover it? So all of these things have to be looked at in context. Are there fundamental issues that were driving the kind of decision that we got with the interest rate capping? We need to understand those and address those, right? It's not necessarily efficient to cap rates because you have unintended consequences that then end up hurting the economy of the long term. And what would be better is to remove them rather than try and keep layering additional controls to try and fix those the original wrong decision.
Well, the Central Bank of Kenya Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge seems to understand that SMEs are the backbone of this Kenyan economy. Whether we like it or not, there's that sustained push for them to have this funding that they need. After that, we did see him go through a series of proposals. But the one that really stood up is when he said that I'm likely to arrest any CEO who does not offer credit to a qualifying SME. But that also took another turn. Now we have the launch of the Starway product, which has been touted as revolutionary. Do you think that is the way to go? And how does the Start With product excite you as the bank CEO?
So it's a good innovation. The intent is the right one, and you have seen the support that the governor has given to the product. It is looking to address a particular issue, which is access to credit, and it has some riders that we've just discussed. You're looking at de-risking, the lending that the banks are doing. And these are pretty much the same things we've been asking for if we're to be able to provide credit at affordable pricing. Because you can't run away from the risk, right? You have to look at it and price it in. So what you have to do then is say, how am I mitigating that risk, right? Now, what we need therefore is sustainable models that we know are going to be driven by competition, right? Make sure we remove inefficiencies that are evident, and we then can see competition really coming to play. Because yes, it is a significant part of our economy. It is, yes, a broad-based employer for our people. We need to enable it. It is really important that we enable it. We have to make sure that we're doing it without destroying value for the people who are taking the risk in this space. So freeing up pricing helps with that, right? Ultimately, competition will drive pricing lower.
So when you look at exactly what the people are saying, that you don't need to talk about interest rates when it comes to lending or SMEs, that the risks will still remain, they're coming from the point that even when you look as from 2016 to 2018, where we are nowadays, even the bad loans that banks have been extending to SMEs are still in record, even at the time when now the banks said, look, you need to assess further, therefore, if you're not going to be given the price leadership model, where I have to decide who gets my money. What does that really say about the economy in the country? Is it that unstable to the point that even when you are crying of these rates, then still the loans that are bad in the economy are still there? Because as from, we still don't know that up to 2017, we still have 60 billion of bad loans being extended to SMEs, but they're still not performing.
Yeah, so there's a bit of cause and effects over there. And the fact that we have such high non-performing loans in the industry at present, you need to go back to when those loans were originated. And I'm sure if you look through all of the different loans, they span quite a period. Some before interest rate capping came in, and some during that period. What you will have seen is a slowdown in the provision of credit to the private sector. And this even preceded interest rate capping, to be clear. But what then you see are the impacts of the interest rate capping now coming to the fore. Remember that you had people suddenly finding that where they were getting consumer credit, now they can't get it. So whatever it is that they were looking to consume also struggles, right? The producer who had products that they were looking to sell has to tone down on their production as well. And so that is one area you would need to look at. But I think there are other factors at play. I think it's well documented that for a couple of years now, and I think the president announced the other day that we need to now unlock outstanding bills to suppliers. This was also a major factor, right? When you have significant sums of money owed to customers who have borrowed to be able to supply to the government, then you're going to have challenges. So, and it has knock-on effects as well. So all of these things need to be addressed in concert, right? Free up the flow of money from government to pay suppliers. Suppliers pay their different suppliers as well, pay off their loans, and the money continues to circulate, right? In tandem, address the access to SMEs. Now, remember that there is, yes, inherent riskiness in every business that you do, right? It will tend to get higher as you, depending on the maturity of your business. So particularly with SMEs, especially if they're newer, they obviously will tend to face higher risks. So the question really we need to then ask ourselves is, how do we help our SMEs to actually be more stable a lot quicker, right? And this is where education programs help, right? We don't want people confusing, their turnover for profit, right? So we need to say, okay, how do you keep books of accounts that then give you an indication of how you're doing as a business? How do we help you to become more bankable? And the KBA, for example, then undertook an exercise to train SMEs, get them to be bank ready, right? They've also trained banks on sustainable finance as well, right? So that we can adopt all of these principles. Ultimately, we all want to make sure that we enable business. So what we have to do is make sure that this is being done in an environment where we are not hurting each other, right? We're putting capital out at risk. Everybody's asking for returns. We're asking for reasonable returns. The market's asking for reasonable returns. We have to make sure that we are balancing the risk against the reward.
Yes. At the recently concluded banking awards, I want to congratulate you for all the trophies that you won. But of note is being an efficient bank within the Kenyan economy, and that coming from 2018. Did you have to change some of your strategies here and there among your products so to move out to that position?
Well, thank you for the compliment, and I accept it obviously on